Introduction. Hello, everyone. Today, I will be your guide for this video. Welcome to part 1 of our series, Beginner's Tutorial on Macro or VBA in MS Office. In our previous series, we covered how to enable, create, edit, and run macros in PowerPoint, as well as how to save files containing macros. We also discussed keyboard shortcuts, the Developer tab, and the Visual Basic Editor, VBA. Although the previous series focused on PowerPoint, the approaches are very similar in Word and Excel. In this new series, we assume that you're already familiar with the basic tools and procedures for using macros, so our focus will be on VBA codes. What sets this series apart is that we've carefully devised macros that can be run in Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. We hope users of all three apps will find these tutorials helpful. In this episode, we'll introduce the basic concepts of variables, parameters, and subroutine calls in VBA, using several simple examples. MsgBox. The examples provided in this series are applicable to Word, Excel, and PowerPoint as their VBA all incorporate a common built-in function or procedure known as MsgBox. It can display a message box with specified text, buttons, title, icon, and other options. This makes it a useful tool for conveying information during the execution of a macro, so we will use it frequently in our examples to demonstrate VBA concepts. MsgBox has the following syntax. MsgBox, prompt, buttons, title, help file, context. The prompt is the text that you want to display in the message box, enclosed in quotation marks. The buttons, title, help file, and context are optional arguments which we will not discuss at this time, meaning we will only use the prompt to show messages. The use of parentheses with MsgBox can be a bit confusing and can result in errors if not used properly. To simplify, when using MsgBox as a subroutine or procedure, we suggest using the word call before the name MsgBox when calling it, followed by parentheses and the prompt, and separate the arguments with commas. When using MsgBox as a function, use the name MsgBox, followed by parentheses and the prompt, and separate the arguments with commas. Then MsgBox should work properly whether it is used as a function or procedure. By the way, in the context of VBA, both subroutine and procedure are often used interchangeably to refer to a block of code that performs a specific task but does not return a value. Section 1, Simple Case. Let's start with our first example, which is the simplest case. This is a subroutine that displays a message box with the text Hello World v1. There are 3 versions in this episode, so we add v1, v2, or v3 to distinguish them. This macro displays a simple message box containing the text Hello World v1. The first line, Hello MSG v1, is the name of the macro. Sub and end sub are keywords used to define the start and end of a macro, and there must be a pair of parentheses after each sub. The second line is a comment describing the function of the macro. In this and the following examples, comments are shown in green color. Comments begin with an apostrophe and are ignored by VBA. You can use comments to describe your code in words to help make it easier to understand. The third line call MsgBox, Hello World v1, is the code to display the message box using the built-in procedure MsgBox. Quotation marks around the message text are required in the code. When you run this subroutine, it will display a message box with the text Hello World v1. You can click on the OK button to close the message box. Section 2, Variables. Our second example introduces the concept of variables. A variable is a named space in the computer's memory where a value can be stored for use by a program. Here is the code. In this subroutine, message A is a variable of type string. The dim statement in VBA is utilized to declare a variable, which reserves memory space for storing a value. It's generally considered good practice to declare variables as it enhances code clarity and helps prevent potential errors. However, it's crucial that the value assigned to a variable aligns with the variable's previously declared data type. Incorrect declarations can lead to errors. It's worth noting that variable declaration in VBA isn't mandatory. Undeclared variables are treated as the variant type, capable of holding any data type. Yet, this flexibility doesn't necessarily reduce the likelihood of errors. In fact, it might increase the risk because variant variables consume more resources and can yield unexpected results if data types aren't handled carefully. While not declaring variables can be more convenient for beginners and allow for quick and effective task completion, the importance of declaring variables becomes more evident as the codebase expands and complexity increases. To assign a value to a variable of a specific data type, the equal sign is used, followed by the desired value. For instance, the line message A equals Hello World v2 is a variable assignment that stores the string Hello World v2 in the variable message A. As mentioned earlier, the value assigned to a variable should align with the variable's previously declared data type. For example, if the variable is of type string, a text value enclosed in quotation marks should be assigned. Finally, the line call MsgBox message A displays a message box with the content of message A. The MsgBox procedure has the same syntax as before, but with a different argument which has become the variable message A. When the macro is run, the message box displays the text stored in the variable message A, so it displays Hello World v2. Now you might be thinking, why don't we just specify values directly? Why bother with these variables to make the thing more complicated? Let's see an example. This example uses variables which represent the length, the width, the number of rectangles, the area of a single rectangle, and the total area, to calculate and display the total area of the rectangles. It should be noted that in programming, the basic arithmetic operators plus, minus, asterisk, and slash are used for addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division respectively. We have simplified the macro here by skipping variable declarations, but the code can still run as explained earlier. From this example, we can see that the reasons for using variables are 1. Reusability. Once a variable like area is defined, it can be used multiple times in your code. This can save you from having to type the same value over and over again. 2. Readability. Variables have names, which can make your code easier to understand. For example, it's clear that length and width in the macro are the dimensions of a rectangle, but it's not immediately clear what the numbers represent if the code is written as area is equal to 10 times 5. The third point is maintainability. If you need to change a value, you only need to change it in the place where the variable is defined rather than in every place the value is used. 4. Flexibility. Variables can hold different values at different times, which makes your code more flexible. 5. Convenience. This is a natural result of the above factors. When variables are used effectively, they can make your code more reusable, readable, maintainable, and flexible. This, in turn, makes your code more convenient to use and manage. One practice that we find very useful and convenient is placing variables at the top of a subroutine or function. This allows us to define all the values in one place. If you need to change a value, you can easily find and modify it at the top of the code, instead of searching through many lines of code. Section 3. Parameters. In this section, we explore the concepts of parameters and arguments in the context of VBA macros. A parameter is essentially a placeholder used in the subroutine definition. It represents the data that the subroutine anticipates receiving when it is called. Parameters are defined in the subroutine declaration and behave like local variables within the subroutine. Conversely, an argument is the actual value that is passed to the subroutine when it is called. Arguments are supplied in the macro call and correspond to the parameters defined in the subroutine. Here's the syntax for defining a macro with parameters. Submacroname, parameter 1, parameter 2, etc. In this syntax, parameter 1, parameter 2, etc. are the parameters you define for the macro. These parameters will hold the values of the arguments that are passed when the macro is called. And here's the syntax for calling the same macro with arguments. Call macroname, argument 1, argument 2, etc. In this syntax, argument 1, argument 2, etc. are the arguments you pass to the macro. These arguments correspond to the parameters defined in the macro name subroutine. The call keyword is used before the macro name, followed by parentheses enclosing the arguments, which are separated by commas. This syntax ensures that the correct values are passed to the corresponding parameters in the macro. In summary, parameters are used to define what kind of data a subroutine expects to receive, and arguments are the actual data you pass to the subroutine when you call it. As an example, see the following two macros, which relate to each other. In MsgSend subroutine, we call MsgMsg, receive subroutine with hello world v3 as an argument. In MsgMsg, receive sub, MsgB is a parameter. Like the case of a variable, the value that you pass to the parameter should match the declared data type of the parameter. When MsgMsg, receive sub is called, the argument hello world v3 is passed into the subroutine, and MsgB will refer to this argument inside the subroutine. The code call MsgBox-simple displays a message box with the text stored in the parameter MsgB, which is the text hello world v3. When this macro is run, you will see a message box with hello world v3 appear on the screen. The advantages of using parameters are similar to using variables. Parameters allow you to write a subroutine once and then reuse it in different contexts, with different data. This can greatly reduce the amount of code you need to write and make your code more organized and manageable. By using parameters, you can also make your subroutines more flexible. They can perform the same operations on different data, depending on the arguments you pass when you call the subroutine. For instance, the HWMSG receive subroutine does not need to change and can display different messages passed to it. Parameters can make your code more readable and easier to maintain too. Why do some macros not appear in the macro dialog box? As mentioned previously, not every macro will necessarily appear in the macro dialog box. For instance, the HWMSG receive subroutine does not appear in the macro dialog box. The reason for this is that the macro dialog box only displays standalone subroutines that can run independently. Subroutines requiring a parameter to be passed when called are not considered standalone, hence they do not appear in the dialog box. This concludes part 1 of our general VBA tutorial series. We've covered the basic concepts of variables, parameters, and subroutine calls in VBA. More information can be found in the description section of this video. You may try to experiment by modifying these subroutines or writing your own codes. If you want to use the demo file, it is available on our Patreon site. Stay tuned for more tutorials in this series. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching. See you next time.